of the year. It is summertime, and all of the associated ting ching ching that goes with that. Let's hope, at least. Uh, we couldn't really have a better cast on a day like today, where we've got China so big in the story. We've got shipping leaping off the front pages of the Financial Times. I'm sure when Rustin chose his career in shipping, he never thought he'd be such a star in demand. And nonetheless, OPEC and Saudi Arabia hosting the foreign minister. And of course, one of our guests was a longtime correspondent based in the kingdom. So all the great voices for the stories we're facing today. But let's kick off with what I think is perhaps the most relevant for the market moving in the immediate sense for oil markets. Perhaps Rustin Edwards, head of fuel oil procurement at Euronav NV. How big a deal is it that Europe has indeed agreed to put a ban on shipping insurance for ships coming out of Russia?
Well, effectively, there's already been a ban of sorts on shipping going in and out of Russia. Insurance rates had quadrupled, if not quintupled, after the invasion happened, with most insurances and P&I clubs claiming that any Russian port, regardless if it was in the war zone or out of the war zone, was considered a hostile port to do business in. So, we've seen this increase in insurance rates, which has dissuaded a lot of shipping from loading out of Russian ports. So in effect, you're just formalizing now that what has been done on a self-sanctioning basis. And in essence, it will have very limited effect on shipping as of now, because most of the flows coming out of Russia are being done on national carriers or on black carriers who are taking a insurance policy out from either Russia or from their origin or destination location. And so they're not really impacted by it. So as I think you can see, as from the Kepler data, the amount of oil on the water from Russian ports has almost quadrupled from where it was pre-invasion, from about 20 million barrels to almost 80 million barrels now. And all those ships are being insured somehow, but they're not just through the EU mechanisms that exist. And granted, it is about 90% of the market is European-based, but that other 10% can cover a lot of flow.
Let's go to Italy and Reem Shamsuddin, who is the former Reuters correspondent in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and now a freelance journalist based in Europe. Reem, we've had the foreign minister of Russia in Saudi Arabia today. He lands in the kingdom on the day that the headlines that your former colleagues, amongst others, are pushing out that OPEC is considering, I know the headline's rather dramatic, suspending Russia from the OPEC plus pact, if you like. But nonetheless, there's perhaps where there's smoke, there's fire. I don't know. Fractures in this group. Your thoughts on what this alignment now means under this current cycle?
Hi, Sean, and hi, everyone. Actually, it's not a coincidence that the foreign Russian minister is in Saudi Arabia. Among the discussions, I'm sure that he's going to talk about oil, and he's already made headlines. They've already met with the Saudi foreign minister, and they talked about oil agreement that they have. They're fully aligned, and they are happy with the cooperation between that they have, and they will maintain. So this is already, this is the official line, and I don't think that this will change. And I don't want to, I'm sure that the report from the Wall Street Journal is based on sources, but as far as I am aware, I don't think that this is going to be discussed at this meeting. Probably further down the line, this will be brought up, but I don't think that this meeting they will be like really talking about excluding Russia from the agreement. This has the agreement between the Gulf states, or OPEC, and Russia goes back to 2016. It's not going to be. It's a long term. The way I see it, and probably OPEC and OPEC Plus, is that they want to maintain this relationship for now, and they will not back away or from that line. Yes.
Okay, well, let's welcome Albert Stromquist, principal at Landstrom Advisors, sitting in China on the day when the headlines seem to be, Albert, it is Shanghai has reopened. It's sort of like the day at the end of the war where people come and start dancing on the streets and can't believe their freedom. And in the midst of it all, the government's promising, Coca-Cola and gravy, freebies all over the place. How do you read the reopening of China?
I've mentioned this thought on a previous call, Sean. There are two optics that one can view the Shanghai quarantine through. The first narrative is that it was purely a response to an explosive outbreak of the Omicron virus, and it needed to be contained because the elderly population of China had not been adequately vaccinated. That was number one. Number two is Beijing is aware that Shanghai has kind of stepped ahead of the rest of the country as a kind of almost in a city state capacity. And Beijing could also be seen to have taken the opportunity presented by the Omicron outbreak to basically slap Shanghai's hand and remind Shanghai that it is not a city state and the people of Shanghai are not exceptional, and they really need to understand their place and their role in Chinese society. And I say that because you could argue that the measures that were taken, the protocols that were put into effect to control the Omicron contagion were more excessive than what was reasonably required. So there's now, this sense that the world is opening again, but I think you'd see a great deal of trepidation today in Shanghai as to what that actually means and how free the people are in Shanghai to resume their normal lifestyle. And of course, in either case, it's come at a great cost to China's economy. And as you say, they're offering all sorts of deals now in Coca-Cola and everything else, but it's all, as I was saying to Rustin earlier, it's all supply side driven. Everything that China is proposing to do is in the form of interest rate adjustments, coupons, whatever, on expensive items. So supporting the manufacturers rather than putting money into the people's pockets to make their own personal choices as to where they need to be spending money on their families. So, how well that's going to work is going to remain to be seen as it plays out over the next few months.
Rustin, I wanted just to come back to the question of the insurance, because what we're talking about here, just so I understand it and for its granular kind of relevance, that yes, there obviously the geographic point you made earlier, but ultimately this deal, the delay in finding alignment within the European Union on this was because they had to bring the United Kingdom into this agreement, because inevitably the center of the insurance universe is in London at Lloyd's list. The Lloyd's insurance. And of course, Greece was very concerned and others in Europe that if they gave up their position or if they banned the insurance cover, then London Lloyd's would get all the business. But now Lloyd's is on board as well. And so from a geographic point of view, that tends to extend shipping geographically not relevant to Europe, but the whole world. No, is that not the point here?
Again, in the realm of the ship insurance, it's about 90% of the world's insurance is covered under the European UK. And the UK already did their own sanctions on servicing Russian ships and Russian flow. Now the EU has joined in. So now you've locked up 90% of the available insurance capacity for ships that are running around Europe into and out of Russia. You still have 10% that's in other countries, as well as nationalized insurance from national flag carriers. So it's not necessarily that there is a change geographically. It's now just consolidating that, where now you have the entire 90% of the market is now off the table for anybody who wants to transport Russian goods. So it's not only oil; it's all Russian goods.
Right, and when we now put that on top of or alongside the announcement yesterday, which of course everybody's still unraveling this sixth round of sanctions. There was a lot in the box, so to speak. The oil embargo on seaborne crude, not pipeline, the shipping ban, the insurance. What's your own assessment on the collective nature of all those pieces? Clearly, the oil markets were on an upward motion ahead of the announcement, and then kind of came back a little bit on the announcement. But nonetheless, all of those pieces together, how do you think they amount to the impact over the second half of the year?
Well, if you actually look at the data of the actual shipping flows, Europe has been curtailing their seaborne imports massively since April. And so if you look at the recent data released by Kepler, you see a dramatic drop off April to May, and another drop off in May going into the end of the month here. So they're down to only 200,000 barrels of imports coming into the EU, if I read the chart correctly, as a max number. So they've already done a fair amount of work pre-embargo on self-sanctioning. Now, all that oil is flowing into other markets, and so it's not gone from the market, it's just going other places, which will then displace other crudes and other products to come back into Europe. So it's just going to increase ton miles, it's going to increase the underlying costs, but it doesn't decrease the amount of available petroleum in the market. I mean, if you look at the actual global stats, global crude stocks have been building primarily in Asia, but they have been building over the last 3 months. The only products have been hit because a lot of refining capacity that was rationalized during the COVID outbreak is not coming back. So I think the world is short roughly 4 to 6 million barrels of refining capacity that was there in 2019. So we do have a different dynamic in the market where you have adequate crude supplies, but limited product supplies, thus supporting margins, thus supporting crude prices.
Reem, I wanted to challenge your thesis in your earlier comment there a little bit, the Kumbaya between Moscow and Riyadh, and remind you that the actual origins of this deal, while this is a 5 or 6 year old OPEC plus alignment, this current agreement was born in a market share war between Moscow and Riyadh in April 2020, when Russia essentially kind of indicated a willingness to walk away from this partnership. And of course, oil prices collapsed just before COVID kicked everything over. But nonetheless, that was the origin of this moment. And so I bring that up because now we have Russia selling increasingly multi-million barrels of oil into Saudi Arabia's key market of Asia, UAE's key market of Asia, at 30% discount. And what was maybe prior to the European sanctions yesterday, some kind of temporary scenario, this now looks like this is going to be baked into semi-permanent, where you've got 2-3 million barrels of new Russian oil selling into the Gulf Arabs' key market at 30% discount. I struggle to see how Love and Harmony survives that one. Your thoughts?
Okay. Well, it's not. Sometimes we do things for diplomacy, like just to find, because we cannot just keep on having like these price wars or who takes more. Sometimes you have to compromise for something, and you have to find like a way that diplomacy sometimes have to work because of this long-term relationship that I spoke about. Now, let's not forget that the Asian market that Russia wants to sell or diverting its crude to Asia, the Saudis have long-term contracts with Asia. So this is like any imminent or more. So this is already locked for like it's long-term. So any immediate effect on like who's taking more from the other, I don't see that this is gonna impact the Gulf producers, because the Gulf producers will eventually find other markets. Like it's only a chance to them to find other markets and to diversify a little bit, because what we learned from the crisis is that one cannot just have one market or rely on one market only. You have to diversify in order to also diversify, take less risks. And I don't see how, as I said, the Asian market is a long-term, they are locked in long-term contracts with Saudi Arabia and UAE and others. And I don't think that this price wars or market share battles will affect, at the end of the day, you lose one battle here, but you will eventually gain another battle in another place. That's the way I see it.
So basically, diplomacy trumps the potential loss of market. Albert, your thoughts on that? And also, you mentioned in your earlier comment, demand. It's one thing to try and stimulate the Chinese market. Where's the demand at for all these barrels? And there is a certain emerging view that maybe China indeed is entering peak oil demand territory. But your thoughts on this point vis-a-vis the harmony in OPEC Plus and demand in China?
Curiously, it's coal that's stepping out ahead of crude oil in China. As China begins to implement its recovery program, it's going to be focusing on steel production, Portland cement production, and those are intensive coal-based processes. So China has stepped up its Russian coal imports, for example, to I think 14% of Russia owning 14% of China's coal imports in April, some 19% in May. So big increase there. Crude oil is ramping up in China, partly driven by the government's decision to start to top off the strategic oil reserves, given the opportunity to acquire Russian oil at reduced discount prices. But that's been involved moving crudes by sea. The pipelines are already pretty well saturated coming into China from Central Asia and Russia. So moving it by sea, lightering in the Mediterranean, and then moving heavy cargoes into Chinese East Coast ports. And that's ramped up imports, I understand, by about 500,000 barrels per day since the Chinese fire drill, you could call it here, in crude oil markets has begun to clarify where all the oil is going. So yes, they're taking more Russian oil. The demand for crude oil hasn't really demonstrated its full, hasn't demonstrated its direction yet in China. But coal is certainly performing very well as an import commodity.
Albert, on that point of the Chinese position, there's been there's a question mark, of course, that whether they would adjust their fuel mix for a temporary equation. Their refiners are set up for Middle Eastern crude on long-term relationships and contracts, as Reem identifies. If you speak to the adjustment that could that impact, again, from moving from a temporary scenario to now what looks like a pretty much medium to long-term reality, would Chinese refiners start to adjust in order to cater for that discounted Urals, which they're not used to?
Well, yeah, in fact, the adjustment is occurring at the level of the teapot refiners, foremost on the East Coast, who are now importing this Russian crude. And they're able to adjust their refinery runs to manage that crude supply from Russia and get a decent split out of it. The big national state refiners are still dependent on the Middle East crude, and would take them time to reconfigure their refineries in the long term if this is going to be a permanent change, as is suggested. So diesel output, for example, is still distressed. I don't believe there were any diesel or very limited diesel exports in the month of May. If they were, it was less than 100,000 barrels a day. So yeah, products are still, as Rustin said, distressed, the product yields. And the teapot refiners will take up part of that slack, but they're, any other change has got to be long-term.
Okay, let's go to the survey question and give the room a view on this point. In the aftermath of EU boycott, should Gulf states be concerned that discounted Russian oil, Urals, because of course they already take other Russian oil, will now be a permanent feature in Asia and challenge to their market share? Should Gulf states be concerned of this development? Yes or no? Welcome the view of the room on that. Rustin, of course, the other narrative we haven't touched on, but of course is the big one. Where is the outlook for economic recession? I know you have been of a particular view that you think the second half is going to bring some demand destruction. Where do you see the outlook for? We've got the markets are sort of giving up on the Fed again. They're back at the party, not believing that this is going to be a cycle in which the central bankers kill demand. Your thoughts on the outlook in the second half on the tightness cycle?
Well, I'm still a believer of a Q2, Q3 recessionary story, mainly impacting Europe first. I mean, you already saw the French final read on Q1 GDP actually was negative, not positive initially. So we are seeing a drag in European GDP growth as high energy prices, high food prices, runaway inflation are all starting to impact people's ability to buy and do things. I mean, yeah, yes, there's a lot of pent up demand for holidays and vacations from COVID. So the service sectors are looking okay at the moment, but that's eventually going to wane as people start looking at, do I buy fuel for my car? Do I buy food for the table? So I still think the inflationary story there, the recession is going to come, and it's going to come probably by the end of Q3 data when it comes out. Demand destruction will happen, and it is happening in some areas already. As again, people are making the economic choices: food on the table, fuel in the car. Where do you want to go? My view hasn't changed, and with the inflation numbers coming out, it looks like it's not getting any better. And so central banks are going to have to start increasing interest rates. I think Canada just announced they're going to do a 0.5 basis point increase, bringing their interest rates up to 1.5. New Zealand's increased their interest rates. So I think there will be a continual tightening cycle going throughout the balance of Q2 into Q3 and trying to slow the economies down. And it's just going to have a massive impact that we haven't felt yet.
Russell, just a quick follow-up on that. When you intersect that outlook with the unity, alignment, support within Europe for continued sort of sanctions and austerity on Russia and the ability to absorb the pain of that, you know, higher fuel, higher other things. Where do you think those two things go? How can they coexist in the second half? The continued support to challenge Russia with the consequence of all the higher inflated costs from that and this economic outlook?
Well, we already saw with the 6th round of sanctions how long it took to get that done. There's a lot of political pressure inside of every country that they can't go through a massive recession just because of the war in Ukraine. And so the political will to do more is getting less and less and less. And I think that's what's going to eventually be a nail in the EU cohesion, is that, you know, will they even able to think about doing a natural gas embargo? You know, my guess is probably not, because there's just way too much economic pain that would be suffered throughout the entire Eastern European blocs to ban Russian gas imports fully. And even when you look at the oil embargo, it's not an immediate embargo. Everybody has till the end of the year. And then, of course, the pipeline has even longer. So, you know, Germany and Poland, I mean, if you read between the lines and with their statements around the embargo, their pipeline connected refineries are still going to run pipeline connected oil until they can, you know, hopefully wean them off by the end of the year. So, you know, the sanctions, you know, they were completely detoothed in my mind because there was no political will to extract the economic pain on Russia against the economic pain at home.
It seems in that regard, we've kind of perhaps maybe reached the final bucket of sanctions. I mean, they've shot all the weapons they have, so to speak, in terms of economic. And I wonder if that's why we've seen Biden's announcement overnight of stepping up the scale of weaponry that they're willing to provide the Ukrainians now, because with all of the economic sort of tools used. The only one left really is to scale up the military capability of the Ukrainians.
I mean, yet last night you had an unprecedented meeting of the Federal Reserve Chairman in the White House discussing inflation and what can be done. Those meetings don't happen because it has very bad optics. It looks like the president's trying to put pressure on the Fed to do more. And the Fed always has to have that realm of independence from what government's in power because they have to manage that part of the economy separately from what the political will is. So if you're having these types of meetings, it tells you even in the US, the inflationary and the recessionary pressures are getting to the point where they have to do something dramatic and to get it all under control because, okay, the Democrats may lose even more when it comes to the election cycle coming up here. Than they're willing to give up because the economy is not that hot.
Not that hot. Reem, following Sergei Lavrov into Riyadh, there is a lot of mutterings that Joe Biden himself is considering the machinations of preparation for a presidential visit are underway. What do you think would need to happen, or what does the horse trading need to look like in order to see Biden and MBS in the same room, sort of essentially having a new relationship together?
Hi, Sean. Yes, I think they last week there have been some visits. Two senior officials U.S. officials visited Saudi Arabia, Riyadh last week, and they talked about many issues. I think there have been a lot of, again, diplomacy and happening recently. Members of the Congress, U.S. senior officials visiting. So I think there is some kind.
And the brother of MBS was in Washington 2 weeks ago. The Deputy Defense Minister, I think his position is.
Yes, so there has been a lot of preparations, probably something getting prepared under the table or something being cooked for that meeting to happen eventually. They're saying next month, if my memory doesn't fail me. So
well, this month now, because it is, I think, yes, June or at the end of the month,
June, yeah,
on the correct sideline of a visit to Israel, which is already confirmed.
Yes. So yes, as I said, it's there are a lot of. I think eventually the two will meet, whether because I think there is some kind of a willingness from both sides to get on the same table and discuss things. Yes, so I think it will happen, but eventually, like.
But on that point, obviously you were a long time, I think, the longest serving foreign correspondent in Saudi Arabia, right through the Obama years and other, and certainly the relationship at that time wasn't very warm as well. I just wanted to get your sense of there is a general narrative in the media that this relationship is quite fractured, more than it has been before. I'm wondering your thoughts on is that overblown, do you think, or how fragile is this 70-year-old relationship, very, very deeply strategic relationship?
I mean, yes, the relationship is colder now than before. I remember when I covered the Riyadh conference when Trump arrived, and it was like there were deals signed, multi-billion deals. It was a huge thing, a huge event that I covered, and I felt the real warm relationship together. But that didn't happen. That is not happening these days. But I see if there's. But I see that this will eventually change because of the whole regional development that are happening and regional alliances that are changing. If you look at, for example, Turkey President Erdogan visited Saudi Arabia after like probably it was the first visit since
10 years, I think.
Yes. So eventually things will happen. Like I don't see I don't see not like a meeting not happening between Biden and MBS. I believe that that the relationship will go to a different will be. I'm not sure that they will be like it will be warm. Probably it will go warmer and will to the previous times.
Right. Well, it certainly feels like something is cooking, especially with the Iran talks seem to be frozen and so forth. And Yemen ceasefire is holding but fragile. Albert, let's give you the last word this morning. Bring up the survey results. We've got a kind of a tight room here view on whether the Gulf states should be concerned about this position of market share in Asia. But Albert, I wanted to get your thoughts because there seems to be the outlook for the zero COVID policy. Now, it must be said, according to the announcements out of the Chinese government yesterday, that there is today, the 1st of June, only 100 infections in a country of 1.4 billion people, which just seems kind of mind-boggling that they'd even know that. But nonetheless, that seems like obviously there's 100, I mean, in this building where I am in Dubai. So it doesn't seem like... But the outlook for this zero COVID policy, a lot of people are betting that it seems like they're easing off. Your thoughts?
Very few people are crossing the China's sovereign borders. Right? So yes, you can target a zero COVID policy and actually succeed if you prohibit entries and exits. Right? And entries and exits are being very, very tightly controlled, and they're very punitive for anyone who desires to re-enter China, having exited. So that's not unremarkable that at this point they could have 100 cases. We're waiting for monkeypox, by the way, this week. So that's next on the menu.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, right?
But as soon as there is a movement toward allowing migration into and out of China and returning to a more normal travel level, I think you'll see a resurgence of Omicron and whatever follows Omicron. And the government has got to have a plan in place and how they're going to deal with that. But for now and into the foreseeable future, to 2023, the border will remain tightly closed.
Well, we will have to leave it there with the Chinese border remaining tightly closed and the oil price sitting just above $116 a barrel on Brent. It seems the market didn't like the dizzying heights we saw yesterday of 123 with the big correction, supposedly on the news that that OPEC Plus is having a little bit of a wobble. But nonetheless, I would suspect there's many reasons why the market wasn't liking $123 yesterday and came off. We'll see where the momentum is today, a little bit unchanged by the looks of it. Thank you so much to our panelists, Rustin Edwards, as always, from Geneva, Reem Shamsuddin from Italy, and Albert Stromquist sitting in China. Really appreciate your insights this morning. Very, very useful on all of those topics that are very much front page today. All the best. We'll catch up with everybody 10:30 each morning. All the best, guys. Thank you.
Reem, bye-bye.